I'm Jared Santek. I'm director of Right On Door County. And at Right On Door County, we're all about inspiring and sharing stories, which is what this morning's about. And I'm so excited that you have the opportunity to interact with this wonderful writer, Kao Kalia Yang. She's amazing, and you're going to have a great morning. Kalia was born in a Hmong refugee camp in Thailand and came to St. Paul, Minnesota when she was 6 years old. She was maybe not the most excellent student in school. During the refugee camp school, she fell asleep constantly through class. She struggled through elementary school. And in high school, she remained mostly silent because she didn't think that her voice would be honored. But she found a way to share her voice through writing. And I want to just share with you a little passage of something that she was working on in high school. I wrote that we'll never know if Romeo and Juliet really loved because they never had the chance. I asserted that love only happened in life, not in literature, because life is more complex. As soon as I wrote the essay, I started worrying about it. What if she didn't like it? What if she didn't agree? What if I had it all wrong? That was my first understanding of how writing worked, how it mattered to the writer personally and profoundly. Unfortunately, that she that was mentioned, her teacher, very much liked Kalia's essay and told her she thought she had a talent for writing and nurtured that talent in our author. So thank you to all of the teachers who encourage and nurture their silent students, and for those of you who are maybe silent and trying to find your voice and would like to find it through writing, I would encourage you to get in touch with us at Right On Door County. It is now my great pleasure to welcome to the podium Kao Kalia Yang.
I'm really short, so I'm standing on a small stool, which means I'm going to stand rigidly. I don't want to fall. Otherwise, we're all going to have an unforgettable morning together. But I'm really happy to be here. You have an hour with me. I'm not interested in boring you. I'm not interested in being boring. So we're going to have a great time together. I'm going to let you ask lots of questions. You're in charge of the learning that we do this morning. No teacher, no matter how good, can be the engine for the learning that you need to do. Nobody can look into your heart and guess what you're curious about, guess what you care about. So you're going to have to be in equal partnership with me, okay? So if this sucks, it's both our fault. And if it's good, then we all have something to be proud of. But I'm going to start out actually by reading to you a ghost story. It's real. And then we're going to open up and have a conversation. Does that sound like a good plan? Okay. So this is nonfiction. And this is, we actually live in this house. I'll tell you the backstory in a little bit. The big tree in the backyard let down its leaves. Dry and casual, they flew in the yard in whirls at night. They flew into the metal fence and stuck. Our backyard was framed by fallen leaves. We lived in the house for the entire summer. It was a small house with 2 bedrooms, a bathroom, a kitchen, 2 stairways. One leading up to the cedar attic, the other to the damp basement. Before we moved in, my mother and father had gone over to clean the house. Underneath the carpet of the stairs leading from the attic, they found a white envelope with a $100 bill inside. We'd used the money to buy pizzas, a small celebration of our new home. We figured it had been a secret hiding place, forgotten in a busy move. We learned later what it was really for. But that summer, there was no fear, no suspicion. Thailand and ghosts were far away, almost a decade in the past. In America, there was science in the church, no ghosts except at Halloween. The first time I saw the little boy, I was rushing to my parents' room to get a diaper for 2. They were both still working second shifts so that they could take care of the children when we were at school. It was late and the lights in the bedroom weren't on. I saw a blur, a small figure in a striped shirt running after me. I paused in the dark, looked behind me, saw the hallway lights stream in. Was it Sue? No, Zhu was smaller than that. It was my eyes. It was me. I grabbed a diaper and I ran as fast as I could. I told Dao and the children's eyes grew big. I shushed myself. A trick of the light, it must have been. Dao saw him next. Again, a figure running into the dark of our parents' room. Dao, braver than I, chased after him. She saw him hurry into their closet. Without turning on the lights, she followed him with her hands, feeling the clothes, the slippery polyester, and the dry cotton, taking in the smell of mothballs. Nothing. She mentioned it to the family as an aside, casual and calm. We didn't give it much thought. At night, in our bedroom, with my eyes wide open, I heard sounds. A ball falling down the attic stairway, then a noise like a child falling after. I wasn't the only one who heard this. My mother heard it. Doug heard it. My father didn't say whether he did or not. He was the most critical. He didn't want to leave scared children behind every night. He said, "There's nothing to be afraid of in this house. Your grandmother's shaman spirits will protect you. Your grandfather's spirit won't let a thing hurt you. We have a right to be in this house. We are not intruding. There is nothing to be afraid of." One night, our cousins, Uncle Ju's children, visited for a sleepover. We spread out plastic mats from Thailand in the living room floor. We watched soap operas from China, dubbed in Thai, all night. My mother lingered with us. My father went to bed early. It was close to 3 in the morning when he walked into the room. His hair thinning was standing on end. His eyes were wrinkled, not from age, but from muscles worked too hard, too fast. "Did you hear me call out?" Everybody shook their heads. Their bedroom door was open, the hallway light streaming in. My father hadn't been fully asleep yet. He saw the little boy in a striped shirt standing in the doorway. The boy entered the room, merged into the shadows along the wall, walked closer, approached the side of the bed, and grabbed my father's arms. My father struggled, he yelled, he fought for us to hear. He could make out the sound of the dubbed Thai voices from the movie we were watching, but no one came to help. My father felt his arm was breaking. He grabbed with his left hand. He found a tiny arm, a wrist, fragile. He twisted, the breaking of bones. My father got up, the little boy danced in the shadows on quick feet and made a dive for the closet. When the light flooded the room, there was nothing. A careful look in the closet, nothing. And so we all came to believe in the haunting of the Section 8 house. From the neighbors, we found out that a little boy about 4 years old had fallen down from the stairs, chasing after his ball. He didn't survive. Money was placed at the foot of the stairs to appease his spirit. We spent this money for pizza. Grandma had visited and her shaman spirits had kept him at bay. In her absence, he'd appeared. My father was the last to believe. The question of what to do next was the hardest one of all. At the time, I was 12 years old. And I had seen this little boy, but he hadn't scared me. The story ultimately ends on a snowy, cold night. The snow was nearly up to my waist. Mom and Dad were at work. Dao and I were taking care of the children at home. It was maybe 9 o'clock and it was bedtime, and so the youngest one needed a bottle. My brother and I went to the kitchen together. I didn't turn on the kitchen light. I just went and opened the fridge and got the milk out and started pouring into the bottle. But I felt all around me this coldness in the air. When we came back, I didn't say anything. I just felt like there were eyes on us. And Dao didn't say anything. My older sister, by 1 year and 9 months, she just sat there with the baby in her arms. And then we felt like we heard a heartbeat. The heartbeat was coming from the walls. We could see the wall moving a little bit. And we felt slowly that the air in the room was getting sucked out. And so, in a single definitive moment, both Dao and I decided that if we did not leave the house immediately, we were gonna die. That we would be unable to breathe, and we would choke, and we would all die. And this is again the middle of winter. So what we did was we grabbed this tiny little baby. She was born in July and it was December, so she was 6 months old. And we grabbed the other 2 kids and we all walked out into the dark night. We didn't know where to go. And so we walked into an unheated garage. And from the window of the garage, we looked at the house and we could see the light in the bathroom on, and we saw the shadow of the little boy looking at us. And then the shadow grew bigger and bigger until it filled up the whole of the window. And we thought we're gonna die out here in the cold. But at that very minute, Mom and Dad came. It was They came back home that night early. And so we were all rescued and we moved out of that house. I grew up a poor kid on the east side of St. Paul. There was 6 kids and 2 parents at that time. We couldn't afford big apartments, and so we squeezed into this little place. And at school I told nobody because nobody wanted to hear one more ghost story from one more frightened lone child. I didn't have the words anyway. But that story would be one of the most controversial stories that I would put into the Latehomecomer, a book that so many of the big critics across America said was a great contribution to literature, except for this story where I fell into the pool of immigrant lore. But that's the story that I started out today. It is the reason why I'm before you today. When I was your age, I wanted to be just like everybody else, but I wasn't. I was a poor kid from the projects of St. Paul. I was a poor kid from the refugee camps of Thailand. I was this tiny little dark-haired little girl who didn't have a voice in English, who would go to school every day, and my teachers would ask me questions because they were nice. They would say, "Why do you have on blue today?" And in my mouth, all the words would be stopped, and I couldn't say it. But in my heart, I had 1,000 answers. Among them, I've never been to the sea. I'm standing in a sea of blue today. Can't you see? You know, all of these things were flowering inside of me. This book is perhaps my first bloom. This book is a compilation of all of the things that make me different, that make me who I am. I'm here because I did not become a writer because of the easy things in my life. I'm here because of all of the hard things. And it was particularly important to me when I came to the Door County community to meet with students. Because so many of you, no matter how young you are, no matter where you come from, you're so lonely in the sea of growing up. And I hope that my coming today would be useful, because I was a lonely youth, I'm a lonely writer. I spent all of my time thinking about how hard it is to be alone in this world, how hard it is to feel isolated in who we are. So I'm here for you. I teach at the colleges and universities. I write all the time. I know that all of you, whether you like it or not, you have to write pretty much all the time. So please talk to me. You can ask me anything at all. I reserve the right to answer you in any way I want at all. If you're sleepy, then now is the time to ask your question. If you're uninterested, then now is the time to ask the interesting question, because I'm here for you. I'm going to step down from my podium so that the glare of the lights isn't in my eye, so I can actually see you. And then we'll let the brave first person go, and the rest will follow suit, and in the process we create a leader. Okay? This is fair? Yeah? Okay. All right, who wants to be the brave first? It only takes one person. Yes, right here. Huh? I was teaching at Carleton College. Do you all know Carleton? Nope. It's a small liberal arts college among one of the top 10 in the nation. A college for a lot of wealthy, predominantly white kids, actually. So I was one of 3 Hmong girls in my graduating class. And that's where I taught last year. I've taught at the University of Wisconsin-Eau Claire. I've taught at Columbia University in New York City. Do you all know Columbia? It's one of the Ivy Leagues, right? I'm a kid from the projects, people, just to give you all perspective and trajectory here. I've taught at Century Community College, North Hennepin Community College, St. Kate's in St. Paul. I've taught at Concordia in St. Paul. I've taught at so many places. I'm very experienced at growing across institutions. And I've lectured at over 400 colleges and universities across the nation, just so you have an idea. So lots of places. That's a good first one. Easy. Anybody want to ask me a harder one? This is for you. You don't have an hour of your life to waste, so make this useful. What do you want to know? What are you curious about?
Where were you born, and can you describe that or compare it to, I guess, Minneapolis?
Yeah, I can. I was born in Ban Mi refugee camp. Do you all know anything about Hmong folk? Let me give you a little bit of history, and then I'll take you to where I was born. So when America was fighting the Vietnam War, and all of you should know a little bit about the Vietnam War, correct? Yeah. America went over to Laos, a country bordering Vietnam, and they fought the secret war in Laos. The Vietnam War, as all of you know, was unpopular in American history, and so the Central Intelligence Agency of the United States decided that they were going to go to these hill tribes, these tiny little farming populations on the tops of the mountains, and they were going to get them to fight and to die on America's behalf so that no American soldiers would die. And so they went to the high mountains of Laos, and the CIA met a brilliant general called General Ving Pao. And they said, find us 32,000 men and boys. And when I say boys, they're boys. If you go Google Hmong boy soldiers, the photos will pop up at you. They're 8, and they're 9, and they're 10, and they're 11. So that's the people that America got to fight the war in Laos, to stop the movement of communism, the Pathet Lao soldiers and the North Vietnamese army from penetrating and entering into the war in Vietnam. That move by the CIA killed 2/3 of my people. A third died with the American soldiers when they were still in the war. And then when the American soldiers left in May of 1975, they took 2,000 of the biggest and most powerful military people with them. And they left all of us to die. There was a declaration of genocide in the papers. They said, the Pathet Lao soldiers and the communist Pathet Lao, they said, it is necessary to extirpate down to the root the Hmong minority. Now, if you look at a globe and you poke a needle through Wisconsin, you end up somewhere in Laos. I'm as far away from this place as you can get. But that war sent my mom and my dad's family, the effort to kill off the rest of the Hmong for having helped the Americans in that war, sent my mom and dad's family into the jungles of Laos. My mother was 16, my dad was 19 when they met each other, and they fell in love. And they thought they would never see each other again. They thought they might die the next day, so they chose marriage. And in the process, they called my spirit from the clouds. I wasn't born in the country. I was born right after my mom and dad and their families had escaped crossing the Mekong River into the Sponbunai refugee camp. The beginning of my story is about 400 acres. If you can begin to visualize, that's about a square mile in radius. There's 40,000 people. In the place where I was born, Hmong people only got food 3 days out of the week. The rest of the time, we had to starve or try to find something else to eat. But Hmong women and girls, whenever they left the camp to forage for food, they would be raped. I've seen, before my very eyes, women and girls crawling back to camp, blood seeping between their legs. Hmong men and boys were beaten up when they went to forage beyond the camp's borders. They were beaten up and sometimes killed. The #1 cause of death in the place where I was born was suicide, because all of these adults are suffering from PTSD. I was born in December of 1980. I'm the biggest wave of children to be born upon the entry into the camps. And we were all given recycled names, names of people who died somewhere along the road, somewhere where there was no time for a funeral, no time for a burial, no time for a goodbye. So we were the second lives that they were hoping to live. On July 27, 1987, the camps were closing. There was no more life for us in Laos, so my mom and dad made the decision to take my sister and me to America, to Minnesota, where they heard that there were these factories and you didn't need to have education, you didn't need to know a lot of the language in order to make a life. Because after me, my mother had 6 miscarriages, all little boys. They were big enough so all the adults could see that they were little boys, but they couldn't come to life because my mother had nothing to feed them. Every time I looked at her, she would give me the food in her hand, the food in her mouth, and so I was the lucky one, and all of these little boys died after me, so I was their baby. That's the place where I was born. That's the place I came from. And I couldn't go to school because this was a test for going to school. You had to be able to touch opposite sides of your ears, and even at 6, I could not do that, so I couldn't go to school. So we came to America. I was 6 years old and 6 months. We came to St. Paul, Minnesota. The most remarkable thing to me about coming to America were the lights. I grew up in a place where people died all the time and everybody had ghost stories everywhere. I was scared of the dark. And so in America, the most amazing thing were the lights. I thought in a world where there were lights, I would never get lost in the darkness. Of course, I would find out that there are also rooms in America to hold darkness, rooms such as basements and cellars. But that's the place where I was born. This place that doesn't exist anymore. Refugee camps all over the country, all over the world are not meant to exist. They're not meant to stand to the test of time. This place where I was born only lives in the heart of me. When my generation dies, the memories of that place will die with us. But for me, it was the first place I saw the world from. It was a place where my father used to dress me up in my best clothing, because I was a cute kid, and he would carry me in his arms, and we'd climb to the very tops of the trees. And he'd tell me, one day, Minai, your little feet are going to walk on the horizons your father has never seen. Up on the top of the trees, up high with the birds, my father used to tell me, you're not a child of poverty, you're not a child of war, you're not a child of despair. you are hope being born, the captain to a more beautiful future. That was the first place that taught me how to dream. That was the first place that taught me how to love. Love beyond the chasms of life and death. Love with every breath of my being until I die. It's a place that made me brave, that gives me the courage to come into high schools like this one, stand before young audiences like all of you who may have no idea who I am, who sees in me no point of intersection with your life stories. That's what gives me the courage to be here. And perhaps because in my heart I know that you're all going to go so much further than I am into the future of possibility. You're the happy ending that I've been waiting for, whether you know it or not. One day when I'm gone, you will still stand, and this country and this world will stand on your shoulders. That's why I'm here. Because of that place that no longer exists, from long ago and far away. Did I answer your question? Yeah? If I didn't, you just have to give me another chance. Everybody deserves a second chance. Okay? Who else? What else do you want to know? Yes, right there.
How hard was it for you to learn English?
That's a great question. I was a kid. I'd never gone to school before. English is my first language on the page. That's what I sound like in my language. It's like I'm singing a song. I feel like I'm much prettier when I speak Hmong. But in English, it's hard for me. Even today, even before you, even after the books I've written, the books I am writing, it is hard for me. English is hard because I have to wrap the air in my lungs to make sense to a bigger world. There are rocks in my throat and I have to sculpt them into shape to make sense to you. Hmong is my first language, the language of love, the language of light, the language of taste on my tongue. But when I first came to America, I was hungry. If a child has never seen a book and you open a book before them, it's an incredible thing. So I fell in love with books. Within 6 months of our coming, I could read. And I could understand most of what people were saying to me. But the thing about learning a second language, as all of you know if you're in a second language, is that you understand much more than you can speak, much more than you can communicate. And so for the longest time, people didn't think I understood what they were saying. Even today, away from a microphone, I'm just walking in the street in my favorite gear. I love sweat clothes. And when I'm just wearing my sweatpants and my sweatshirt, a lot of people speak to me and they don't think I understand English. So they're always like, do you understand? Or they're always slowing themselves down for me. And I think they're trying to be nice. But I think they're also, in trying to be nice, not seeing that I was only 6 when I came. That I'm as American as any of you. That's kind of hard for people to see sometimes. But it wasn't hard. The learning wasn't hard. The speaking was hard. The speaking was harder, and it got harder when my mom and my dad were sent to work in the factories, and their bosses would tell them, you're not here to talk to me, you're here to talk to the machines. And then they come home. You know, my parents have lived in America for a long time, but their English isn't good, because in the work that they've had to do to survive in America, nobody ever wanted to hear the things they had to say, just how fast their hands could run after the machines. So, that wasn't so hard for me, but it broke my heart, and it made it stronger in the process. You know, the way I speak is very different from the way I write. When I'm writing, I'm not knocking on your door, waiting for you to open. I'm not ringing your doorbell, waiting for you to open. I have a key into the language, and I can slam that door, kick it if I'm frustrated. So very different relationships to English. Much better on the page than off. But it's still important for me to talk. My father says that when I write on a computer, I write on a page. When I speak, I have the opportunity to write into the heart of who you are. So whether you choose to read my books or not, because of this moment right here, right now, I've been imprinted into your memory. If you ever hear the name Kao Kalia Yang again, if you see me again anywhere, you will know, you will remember this moment right here, right now. That is the power of speech. It's why I speak. It's why I work in English. Because I want to touch beyond my people. I want to build a greater, stronger, more understanding humanity. When I'm writing, and this is a tip for all of you, when you're writing, it is never about getting people to agree or disagree with you. That's a losing battle. It's a losing fight. If you can deepen their understanding of who you are, where you're positioned, how you see the world, you've already won, regardless of where they stand on the debate. You've already won. That's the thing that good writers go for on the page. a deepening of understanding. It's how you change the world, you know. If only one of you, if I say something, only one of you sees a light from somewhere you've never seen, hears in my voice something that speaks to your heart, I've already succeeded. The quota of understanding the world rises only because of one of you. I don't need all of you, only one. That's why I play the game in English. That's how I live in the language. It's a working language for me. It is not the shade on a sunny day. It is not that cool cup of water in a 90-degree summer's day. It is a working language. Does that make sense?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you. Right here.
How many books have you read?
I've written 2 published books, The Latehomecomer, The Reason Why I'm Here. I've written The Song Poet, published in 2016. I've written 2 children's books, and they will come out in the fall of 2019. I've already written them, people, and it's not going to come out until the fall of 2019. If anybody's interested in publishing, just to give you an idea of how long the process takes. Right now, I'm working on 3 books. One is called Descendants of Bad Luck Women. That is my fictional debut in adult fiction. I'm working on a book called What God Has Honored Here. It is for women and girls who have suffered through miscarriage and infant loss. Because my first baby died on me at 19 weeks inside of me. And I had to deliver him into the world. Just deliver him so I could say goodbye. It was the saddest thing that I personally gone through as a woman. And so I'm putting together this anthology. It's called What God Has Honored Here. And then I'm working on another book of nonfiction. It's about all the refugee groups, the 12 main refugee groups actually in Minnesota and the rest of the country, because Minnesota is huge for refugee resettlement, as is Wisconsin. And it is called Somewhere in the Unknown World. That book has to be turned into my agent on August 31st, 2018. So I have a few months left. So I write all the time, and I'm a part of a lot of people's books. I contribute chapters, I write forewords, lots of things, because I'm interested in supporting writers across the spectrum. Because it's harder to survive as an artist in America. It is harder to survive as an artist in America than it is to become a professional athlete. Did you all know that? So we have to help each other in order to survive. We have to push each other up. And there's already enough pulling down. Right here, yes.
Was it hard for you to publish your first book?
That's a good question. Yes, it was really hard for me to publish my first book in so many ways. In light of all of the other writers who published books, it's been such a smooth journey. And I'll tell you why. So I'm a kid from the projects of St. Paul. I went to Carleton College, and then after Carleton, I went to Columbia University. And I'd never been to New York City before I went to school. I applied, and I was accepted, and I was given these fellowships. And so I knew I could afford to go. But I'd only ever seen New York on TV. And so it was a culture shock for me. I'm a poor kid, too. And so you add in the component that there were holes in my jackets that I wanted to hold because I was afraid other people would see it and that they would maybe judge my mom and my dad. Not me. I'm not so afraid of people judging me, but I was afraid that people would judge my mom and my dad. And so I would hold the holes close. And then I was also only 22 when I began the MFA program. The average age in an MFA program is 29. So my classmates are older than I, and the 2 of them also had Pulitzer Prizes to their name in journalism. So I was really intimidated. I couldn't write off. I was afraid. I couldn't write. I was still a victim of the semicolon and other grammatical structures. That's just the truth. And so there were nights when I remember going on these long walks around Columbia's campus, and I tell myself, oh, the lights in the law school are still on. The lights in the physics department are still on. Somewhere in the physics department, somebody's looking for the cure to cancer. Somewhere in the law school, somebody's opening up a human rights case, and we're never going to see the world again. But they're all working by electricity light. If I sit out here by the light of a greater moon, if the moon has the power to pull the ocean tides, why can't it pull the words out of me? I had to build stories, open possibilities for me just to write. Once the book was written, and I thought I graduated from the MFA program in 2 years. I was the first person to graduate from Columbia's MFA program in 2 years. It never been done before. Usually takes an average of 5 years. But my money, the funding was only 2 years, so I had to finish. I had a manuscript in my hands, and there were all these literary agents who were coming by and they were interested in my work because my teachers had said nice things about me. So then I thought I could stay here and finish the book here and get it published here, or I could go home. And coming home was important because St. Paul, Minneapolis has the biggest concentration of Hmong in the country. I thought if one Hmong writer is going to emerge, if the first Hmong writer is going to emerge on the national landscape, shouldn't she come from where the Hmong people are? So I came back home to finish my book, and I wrote back to all of these agents when I thought my book was ready, and none of them wrote me back. And then I wrote all of their agency heads, and I said, oh, this agent was interested in my work, would you take a look? And some of the responses I got back were very painful. They're like, we don't even know who the Hmong are. Vietnam was such an unpopular chapter in American history. Do Hmong people even read anyway? And in my heart, I kept on thinking, but I'm also writing for you. Don't you see? I'm also writing for everybody else who taught me how to read and write. Don't you see? But they didn't see. And so it was my birthday, and I was very desperate, and I Googled, because I remember somewhere in my head reading that Minnesota had the best independent publishing houses in the nation. And we do. I Googled that. Coffee House Press came up. I went to their website, and they said, we're interested in publishing the underrepresented voices in literature. And I said, that's me. So I wrote a query letter, and then they asked me for 3 chapters, and I sent in 3 chapters. And then they asked me for the manuscript, and I sent in the manuscript, and I heard nothing for like 2 months, a very long time for when you're waiting. And then I got this email from Chris Fishbach, who's now the publisher at Coffee House, and he said, would you like to meet me for coffee? And I went. Monica Lewinsky, do you all know her? Yeah, she was writing a book at the same time, and she got $1 million for her book. Now, I didn't think I would get $1 million, but I thought I was a better writer than her. So maybe like, 90 or something, because I spent 4 years of my life on it. But I sat opposite Chris, and Chris says, I can offer you $3,000 for your book. Not a lot of writers will tell you how much they sold their first books for, okay? But I will. He said $3,000. And my sister, who was a young lawyer, she was there with me. She says, no, Kalia's worth at least $3,500. So that's how much I sold my first book for, $3,500. That's the story. And it is now still the best-selling book in Coffee House Press history. It has won 2 Minnesota Book Awards, which no Minnesota author, no Minnesota book has ever won 2 Minnesota Book Awards. And every step of the way we are making history. Because I'm pretty sure that no Hmong person has ever stood here on this stage with this microphone in their hand before all of you. I'm the first. We're making history here. This is what it feels like. Not so glamorous, but this is what it takes. So that was my first book, and it became the first Hmong authored book to have national distribution from a literary press, to win the kinds of awards and recognition that it has won. And my second book followed up, and it got even more national attention. But that also means that I'm like in this little pond, and I'm going to go to the ocean. It's a little bit scary, but very exciting. I did more than answer your question. But if you're interested in writing, those things that I'm saying are very important for you to know. Anybody else? Right here, yes. Oh, that's a good one. You know, I love A Day No Pigs Would Fly. I read it and I cried. Do you know that book? It's a young book. It's very thin, but it's very beautifully written. And it's about this poor boy whose father kills pigs for a living. And on the day his father dies, that's the title, right? A Day No Pigs Would Die. His father dies, and then but that book always made me think about my own father. Because my father works as an assembler for most of his life, and then as a machinist. And when you work as a machinist, your hands continually cut by metal and by steel. So my father has really, really rough hands. The Hmong gesture of love is like when your parents want to tell you that I love you, what they do is they sweep your hair back away from your face. And whenever my father does it, it hurts so much because the cuts and the scars on his hand, they pull at my hair. And so I have to be very brave. And ever since I was little, I have to remember not to wince, otherwise he might stop, and not to cry, otherwise he might see. So that book really spoke to me profoundly. But it's not the only one. You know, there aren't many books about Hmong people in the world, about little girls like me. So I grew up reading like Laura Ingalls Wilder. Loved Hatchet. Do you know that book? I used to look at every big tree I saw at every single park thinking that someday if something were to happen, I could go and carve out a home. You know, in the trunks of the big trees. I love The Little Prince. Do you know The Little Prince? You should all read The Little Prince. It's a great, especially if you're thinking about getting into a relationship, it's very helpful. The advice in The Little Prince teaches you about anticipation, how you love one rose and you love that rose so much, and then you walk into a garden of roses and you know that the world is full of rose gardens, but you still die for that one rose that taught you how to love, however imperfect. It's a beautiful story. I read a lot. I love lots of books. I have to, in order to build a life in writing. But these days, I love the writing of young, the writing of young writers, because they try new ideas, and sometimes it doesn't work at all. But sometimes they're this close to making it work, and I can teach them. I can tell them, if you do this, it will work like this, like this, like this. And sometimes they're like, "Oh, I'm not interested," and sometimes they accept the advice and the insights that I'm offering. But at the end of the day, I walk away from the garden of their creativity. It's such a gift. But I read widely. I read all the time. I read a lot of poetry. I love a Minnesota author called Louise Erdrich, but she's like a mountain in the landscape of literature. Poets are like the clouds in the sky. There is a young poet called Maidova from California. Her work is beautiful. There's a young Vietnamese American poet. His work is beautiful. It's called Night Sky with Exit Moons. Can you imagine? Night sky, think about it. Night sky with exit moons. What are the exit moons, right? Start thinking about stars. You start thinking about all of these possibilities. His name is Ocean Wong. He's very, very good. So I'm reading all the time, everywhere, everything. I love graffiti on walls, bathroom walls. Saw a really good one at a tiny little rest stop in Wisconsin, of all places. And it said, "I would not be divorced to him now if I had learned how to marry me first." The person was so angry. I could hear them writing. They were writing with a key. I could hear it. So it's metal on metal. And I stayed in the bathroom until she was done. When she left, I went to look, and she had written, "I would not be divorced to him now if I had learned how to marry me first." And I thought, wow, that's great writing. I couldn't tell her, and I didn't want to write, "That's great writing." So, you know, I decided I just carry the words in my heart. Once in a while, I'll see like an ad, and it's incredible too, right? Like Nike has this one, "Pain is the beginning of courage." I think it's good writing. So I read all over. I read everything. You have to. You don't want to limit yourself. Life is about pushing your possibilities. It's about outgrowing who you are. The skin that holds you, it's about pushing against that. Anybody else? Yes, right there.
What genres of writing do you read, and then what would you say is your favorite genre that you've ever written?
When I started, when I was applying to writing programs, I applied to all fiction programs except for Columbia's program, where I applied for nonfiction. When I was a little kid and I was first learning how to write, I write all of these stories about a young girl who was poor, whose mom and dad were always worried about money. I write about, people yelling at my mom and dad or yelling at me, and I never have the words or the answers to solve the problems of our life. I thought I was doing fiction, but it was clearly nonfiction. And so in the end, I always said, "Oh, she died suddenly." The end. I kill myself all the time in all of these early drafts. And it wasn't until a teacher said to me that I was cheating, that you can't kill yourself in a story, that writing isn't about solving the problems of a bigger world. That writing is about confronting it, reckoning with it, realizing, reflecting on. And so nonfiction has always been my home. So many of the fiction programs that I applied to rightfully and intelligently rejected me. And so I was trained in nonfiction writing, creative nonfiction writing, which means I do a lot of imagining. I do a lot of creative work. It's called creative nonfiction, right? I don't pretend to be a journalist. I'm not writing for you the objective truth. I'm writing for you the truth from where I'm positioned, which doesn't mean that I lie, and so I do a lot of research. Like for this book, I read everything that had been written about the Hmong experience in English. You think it sounds like a lot, it's about a stack this high down. Not a lot at all. But that's where I felt my home. Now I'm stretching my arms and I'm going into children's literature, inspired by real life but fictionalized. So it gives me a room for me to float into this other world because I'm working up to writing my first adult fictional debut. Does that make sense? So I'm taking baby steps in. So I'm writing this chapter book for young kids too called The Diamond Explorer. It's not young kids, but younger readers. So always, I'm working across genres. And people say my work is very poetic because poetry has a lot to do with the speed at which you accept meaning and you deliver it. How do I say this? Poets live by the word, prose writers rest on the sentence. Does that make sense? I get a whole sentence to say something. Poets get one word. And so the meaning is condensed, it's concentrated. The blow they're going to deliver, they're going to punch you if they can. They're not looking to shake your hand. They're not looking to say, would you like to dance with me? They're not looking to turn on the music, to turn down the lights. Poets don't have that much room. They're working in a much shorter form. And so I'm continually learning from across the genres. I would never limit myself to just one. That'd be too boring. Plus, that would mean that I wouldn't be able to learn from the tools of a certain perspective, a certain delivery, a certain craft. And that's sad. Will that make sense? Always position yourself where you can learn the most. You're young, now is the time. Right there, yes.
Since music is such a great medium for emotion and thought, have you ever considered going into that?
I don't have the voice for it. My father is a beautiful singer. But I don't have his voice. I cannot carry the same beat, the same rhythm, the same tone. I do it on the page, and that's my biggest strength. It's a great medium, and I love beautiful songs, but I don't have the ability. Life is interesting. At some point, you choose a path. And for me, I've been pursuing writing for 15 years, people. Ever since I was 22 years old, I've been actively pursuing this path. And now I'm in too deep. Now I want to see if I can touch the bottom of that ocean I've started going down. So music isn't for me. It's for somebody else who's more talented in that realm. But I have tremendous appreciation, and music inspires something inside of me. Right here, yes. I did. I just got back from a very dangerous and harrowing trip into Laos where I almost died. Most people die in cars in Laos. Car accidents are the #1 cause of death, like a lot of developing countries. Laos has 21,000 kilometers of road. Only 9,000 of them are paved. And most of them are not paved because they're unpavable. They're climbing up steep mountainsides. And the roads are not wide. And you have trucks coming down because major corporations from Australia, from China, from the US are going in and we're mining it because they have gold, they have diamond, they have silver, they have all of these minerals that we're taking forward. So you have these giant metal monsters taking out bites of mountaintops and spewing them out. So it's a very dangerous, very heartbreaking country. But the people in Laos are incredibly resilient. Laos is the most heavily bombed nation in the world. It remains the most heavily bombed nation in the world, if you're ever asked, so you all know. You know, I went back and there are craters as big as this auditorium, and there are trees twice as tall. That's how amazing Laos is. That's how amazing the people of Laos are. You know, so I've been back, but it isn't my home anymore. It is the home of the people who love me, the ghosts of my ancestors, and I can feel them there. I can feel their love and their waiting and their yearning to meet me again. There were so many stories waiting in Laos for me to return to, and so many that I have to write now that I've left. But there's too much of me now that belongs in this cold place. I have 3 little kids here. I'm married to a white guy who was born, well, not born in Wisconsin, but he spent a great deal of his time in Milwaukee growing up. My life now is here. My work is here. You are here. Whether you knew it or not, I had to come back and I had to be here today. So my life is no longer there. But a piece of my heart and so many of the stories that make me who I am are there and elsewhere in the world, waiting to be found. My grandma used to say this thing. I used to make a lot of wishes. When you were a poor kid and you really You really want a house that's big enough where when your grandma comes to sleep over, you don't have to sleep underneath the dining table in the kitchen. When you dream of one day becoming this or that thing, you make a lot of wishes. And so I used to make 1,000 wishes on stars in the high sky, and none of my wishes would come true. I used to cry, and my grandma used to tell me, Midnight, don't send your wishes to the stars. Send them on the airplanes. It means that your wishes are somewhere in the world waiting to be found, waiting for you. And so that's what I do now. But so many of those wishes have settled into the dirt of loss. And so I have a lot more, I think many more trips to take to that place. Right there.
Do you have any advice for aspiring writers?
Yes. When I was in 7th grade, and I don't know why I did this, because all of my life, I'm going to stop myself. And I'm going to say this. If you're talking, I can hear you just like you can hear me, okay? Public speaking is really hard. And it's particularly hard if you're not reading a speech, because I'm not interested in talking at you. I want to be in conversation with you. So when you're talking, I can hear you. It makes it that much harder for me. I don't know how many of you have to do public speaking, but eventually all of you will. So I want to tell you, you got to be respectful so I can continue, okay? Which is a brave move that I just did there. But you cannot teach bravery. You cannot teach courage if you will not be an example of it. We cannot be one people if we're not going to wake each other up from our dreams. Particularly when somebody's throwing their heart at us, okay? But to go back, advice for young writers. I was in 7th grade and my mom and my dad were talking about how we didn't have enough money to pay the mortgage that month. And I went into my room, and I always thought I would become a doctor because I come from 3 shamans, medicine people, healers. And so I always thought, my mom and dad always said we needed doctors and lawyers. And my sister was going to become a lawyer, and I was going to become a doctor. But I wrote down in my journal, I said, how does a writer become? And I pressed so hard on the pen that I destroyed the page. So I flipped it over, and on the bottom of the second, I wrote very, very tiny letters. I said, she keeps writing, period. That's what I have to say to you. You got to write. Because not everything you write deserves to be published. But it is easier to make a 277-page book from 1,000 pages written. The more you write, the more opportunity you give yourself to have material to choose from, but also to practice the craft. You don't just run a marathon without practice, people. You know? So for me, when I'm doing texting, I'm in the gym. When I'm writing an email, I'm in the gym, working out the same muscles that would allow me to run the marathons. I try to do what I do thoughtfully. A lot of writers don't think about it this way. We have like 4-pagers do all the time, or 2-pagers, and we think we're just going to write it and turn it in. So few think about it this way. Writing is a sequencing of meaning. You build sentences around words. You have to think about the one word that you're building your sentence around. You have to deliver the strongest sentence you can, enough so that it has the power to pull on the other words coming along, the other sentences. You're making meaning in the process. So if you're a young writer and you want to become, you have to give yourself so much opportunity, so much material, so much practice on the page. That's what it takes. That's what you need. And then I have to say, you cannot be a perfectionist. Everybody learns, everybody slips, everybody falls, everybody has room to grow. If you're going to go into writing and you don't give yourself room to grow, it's going to be way too easy to get disheartened. You know, I'm trained in the workshop, so that means that people will read my work and they'll tell me, this is boring. It's hard to hear that the thing you're writing is boring. But you have to learn how to ask the question, what about it makes it boring for you? Give them an opportunity to explain. The only way to grow is to grow with the feedback of intelligent, thoughtful people. Does that make sense? And so sharing your work is an important part of becoming a writer. The ability to share, to hear what people have to say. But that's an important part of life. If I have a horrible attitude and you're not going to tell me that, I have a horrible attitude, like my sister or my brother, they're going to let me go into the world and torment my roommate. That's not how life works. And so garnering and respecting the intelligent feedback of people who love you and trust you first, and then the people who don't understand you and will misunderstand you second. That's how you grow as a writer. But a book isn't just a one-person endeavor, you know. The Latehomecomer, I wrote it, yes, it's been edited through like 10 different hands. 3 different interns read it, and they said it deserved to be published before I got to Chris Fishbach, who read it and edited, and I edited, and then he sent it on to copy editors and stuff. A whole team is with you when you're writing a book, unless you self-publish, and self-publish is only good if you already have the literary foundations to stand on, which I don't. And I suspect a lot of you may not as well. And so understanding that it's a teamwork, it's a team endeavor in the end. It's a collaborative push. Because I cannot push a book by myself. Even my visit here today, I cannot make happen by myself. A team of people sat back and they organized it. They talked to your teachers, your school, and they agreed to pull all of you here. 200 people, that's hard to navigate, hard to move. But that's just what it takes. The artist, more than anything, has to love and be loved by people in order to succeed. More than any other job in the world. Does that make sense? Because the artist, every time we work, whether you're painting, whether you're making music, you are speaking to the beat of the human heart. It is the pulse of humanity that you feel. Every story must be bigger than itself. For example, the Latehomecomer is about me, but if you've ever been loved by an old woman, if you've ever loved her in return, it is also you. And like so many of us in this room, right, the Latehomecomer is about the Hmong experience, the Hmong people coming to America. But unless you are native, you also came from somewhere to call this place home. And it isn't so many generations ago that your families came here to make you Americans. The ability to become an artist, to become a writer, to stand and to stand back and have perspective is to understand that you are only here for a moment in time. The spectrum of life is long. The vast trajectory of humanity is far. But you understand that you are not going to write the book of humanity. You have one chance to get one line in that book. That is it, and that is all. No matter how great you become. And so at the same time, it is to understand how little you are and how big life is. And to put that in relationship to each other. That is the heart of the artist, the heart of the writer. Does that make sense? If I'm saying things that aren't making sense and you are not calling me out on it, I'm not helping you. So if I'm saying something and it's unclear, you got to raise your hand and say, explain that to me in a different way so that the words I'm saying are useful for you. I'm trying to give you everything I have to give you within the space of 1 hour in the hopes that it will be useful, that something I said today will be useful in the life that you live, that you will live long beyond me. Okay? It's very ambitious what I'm trying to do right here, right now. So I need your help. Anybody else? Right there, yes.
So hailing from the family of shaman, how have spirits and ghosts influenced your life, and have you grown to not fear them?
That's a great question. So I'm married to the son of 2 ELCA ministers, pastors. Okay, so it's an entirely different tradition that I'm marrying into, which means I have all these perspectives. But in my house, every year, every New Year, during the harvest time, we make a feast. And we don't eat first. We call our ancestors to the table, because for every one of me, there's like at least 1,000 men and women who've died, who brought me here. I am the descendant of so many. We call them to the table, and they eat first, and then after they eat, we eat. And so, as a child, I always, I imagine them. I imagine some of them looking very grand and others looking very humble, and everybody coming to the table and eating first. And then I go and I take up their spoons, the very spoons that they've eaten from, and then I make my meal. That's the home that I came from. So ghosts are not just scary things. There are also the things and the reasons and the spirit and the energies that bring us into being. So while I've always been scared of ghosts, it's always been ghosts protecting me. Does that make sense? Like when I was a kid and I was scared of the dark, because we lived in these crumbling down houses that were always haunted by so much. Maybe perhaps above them all poverty. But I get scared. I used to put all my blankets around me like a nest, and I imagined that they were the arms of my ancestors holding me safe. So I'm not entirely scared of ghosts in that way. I'm also in love with them as much as I fear them. But the thing about it is this: my grandma has always said to me that in the darkness there's a lot of room for a lot of people. And if I'm scared or if I don't know what to do, I should call on the Dalai Lama, she said, call on my ancestors, call on Jesus, call on God, call on everything that will protect what is good in me to keep me safe. That there is nothing to fear if you're with people who have faith across the traditions. And her words have always strengthened me. In New York City, there were days when I was afraid and lonely, and days when I just felt small. I used to go sit at St. John's Cathedral because it was only a block from where I lived, and I used to feel at peace because I knew that I was in a fortress of faith. I've been to temples and synagogues, and it is the same peace of heart I find in those spaces. So I am very much the granddaughter of shamans. In that I believe that you cannot heal the body alone, that you must heal the spirit and the soul of a person. But I'm also this kid who goes to the doctor whenever I feel sick, right? And so I'm like this depository of so much. And I'm at peace with all of it. There's no contending, fighting forces. Like my husband, when he dies, he's free and welcome to go to heaven. That's where his parents will be waiting for him. But I'm going to climb the Hmong mountain in my heart. I'm going to open up the house of my youth and walk in. And everybody who's loved me, everybody, the hundreds and thousands of people who've been waiting for me will sit there. And I will find my place among the ancestors. I'm at peace with that. A weird way of answering your question, but you get it? Anybody else? I'm right here. Yes. Yeah?
Oh, okay. Who are all your siblings and what do they do?
That's a good question. So I have an older sister. I say she's a lawyer. She became what she says she would be. She's an inch and a half shorter than me. A year and 9 months older than me, but she acts like she's the world older. She has answers for everything. She's the strength in my backbone. She allows me to stand tall in a world full of contracts, full of legalities. She allows me to enter spaces like this and be very brave. And then there's 10 years after me because my mom had 6 miscarriages after me. So I have a brother, and then I have 3 sisters, and then I have a 14-year-old brother who was born 9 months after my grandma died, 10 years after my youngest sister. So my family has a wide spread, and it is almost as if we belong to 3 different families, right? My older sister and I, and then the 4 of them, and then Max, the youngest one. And we're all in different places. It's incredibly humbling to play on such a big team and to love them so completely. Because the thing about love is that love can save nobody. Love can't save people. I love my sister so much, but could I have saved her from being raped? Could I have saved her from wanting to kill herself? Could I have saved her from the years and years of work, of crying, clawing to stand up again? Couldn't. I just had to love her through it. And to love somebody knowing that you cannot help them, knowing that your range of experience doesn't allow you, didn't give you the tools to give them the things that they needed to hear, needed to feel, is incredibly hard. You know, but because I'm one of the older ones, I took care of the younger ones. I used to change their diaper and give them baths and stuff, and I always thought that when I became an old woman, they would maybe drive by and take me to coffee, or take me to lunch, or visit me and read me books. I always thought that. I never knew to think that at the age of 35, I would die giving birth to my children. My heart would stop beating, and I would leave my body, and that I would have to return again. I never thought that my sisters would have to bathe me, as I had bathed them so many years ago. I never thought that they would have to change my baby's diapers and take care of them, as I had taken care of them so long ago. Life is unpredictable. My siblings were the team, my original team, the team that I was born to, the team that was born to me. Among all of the things that I would do and I would be, and I have many aspirations, my biggest hope and my biggest dream and my biggest goal is to die with all of my siblings beside me. And that we die in the order of our birth. That would be a gift. A gift from the high heavens. Because the thought that terrorizes me the most is that I would ever have to say goodbye to any of them before it was their time, their just time. That's hard. Loving people as completely as I love my siblings, being loved by them as completely, is an incredibly humbling experience. Because you cannot live somebody's life for them. You cannot get up for them when they are tired. You cannot pull them forth when they're sick. And loving somebody entirely means that you love them for where they are, not where they were, not where they could be, but for where they are in life. And that is one of the hardest things. I'm still learning how to do better. But that means that my siblings are teaching me the most important lessons of my life. that make sense?
Yeah.
Right here.
How do you feel about recent refugee crises and like the experience those people have, and if we all could be doing more to help?
It's such a good question. When I had given birth to my boys and I was coming back to life, one of the first things I did, and not a smart thing, after the ICU was I turned on my phone to read my email messages, and then I went on Facebook to check in on all my friends, and again, I was seeing that picture of that little Syrian boy washed up on the shore. And I in the NICU, I knew my own 2 boys were resting, waiting on the others of life, in the others of possibility, of life with me. It was, I just wept. And all the nurses would ask me, what can we do for you? Anything at all. What can we do for you? What can we do to make you happier, to make you better? And I couldn't tell them that they needed to have raised that boy from the dead, to take away that picture of him lonely on that shore. When I see the story of refugees, I see myself in a big world, a world that has been making and continues to make more and more refugees every day. There is no guarantee that all of us here in America, that one day we won't be refugees ourselves. And my hope for all of you, because I love you, is that there is some country somewhere, some people somewhere, waiting to give you a chance at life, waiting to welcome you to the shores that you've never been, to the languages you don't know, so that you have some chance somewhere in the world of continuing to that beautiful future that we are building together. For me, it isn't that I'm an ally. It is because I have the heart of a refugee child. You know, when I hear about all of the struggles from the LGBT community, from the Black Lives Matter movement, from women in Donald Trump's administration, I feel in my heart the sadness. And because I know what it is like to always have to fight to belong. I know what it is like to be clinging onto life. My mom and dad have always told me that I was the happy future that they were waiting for. That I was it. That there was no happier ending for them than what my life would turn out to be. And in the happy future, we have to have room for a future in Kao Kalia Yang. Room for a possibility for you guys that you can't even imagine today. We have to have room and people waiting to welcome and to love. That's how I feel. My husband, one night he woke up crying, and I said, "Why are you crying?" And he says, because America is talking about not accepting refugees, and you know that if they don't, then love stories like ours couldn't happen. Children like ours wouldn't be here. And I tell you, he's a white boy from Wisconsin. When we close our doors, we close ourselves to possibilities of love, of greatness, the things we will never know if we don't open those doors. So it becomes a question of how you want to live your life. Do you want to live the life that you know will happen, or do you want to live a life that you cannot imagine, that is better than anything you've ever dreamt up? That's the question before us when we talk about issues of closing our door. Is that helpful? That's where I stand. Anybody else? I have no idea where we are in time. Okay, last question, because I want to make sure that you can continue on with your day. Okay, yep.
Do you ever feel like you get stuck in your writing, and if so, how do you inspire yourself?
Oh, that is so good. I do, and you can't help it. If you're in writing, you're going to get stuck, right? It's like if you're continually in the water, your chances of drowning goes up. These things are just a part of the game. When I get stuck in my writing, this is what I do. I have orchids. I love orchids. And they like ice cubes. They're very easy to grow. I give them about 3 ice cubes a week. And I give it to them every Wednesday. And on a Wednesday when I'm not there, I ask my husband to do it. And he's very sad because, you know, I talked to you about when I almost died. He imagined that every Wednesday for the rest of his life, he'd have to feed my orchids. Because some of these orchids are like 10 years old. They're old. But when I'm stuck in my writing, I go and I look at them. And I look at the sun coming through the window. And I look at how the sun hits the petals. And I'm reminded that even on a cloudy day, they're beautiful. I'm reminded that even when I'm crying, they're still beautiful. There are some things that just are. And the thing about it is that when you're writing of life. It doesn't matter if you're writing about atoms and protons. It doesn't matter if you're writing about refugees. It doesn't matter if you're writing about designer shoes. You're writing about the world from where you are positioned, your experience of life, and that is beautiful. So that frees me up to know that these things will not change, no matter how inadequate I feel going at them. And then there's just this thing. Sometimes you're up against a wall. You're not going to be able to hit it. You're going to have to go around it. You're going to have to go on top of it. You're going to have to dig underneath it. That's what experience teaches you in writing. The more you write, the more ways you will learn how to jump over things. You will marry yourself to certain ideas. Like, for example, I loved the semicolon for a while there. I loved it too much. It was getting predictable, right? On a given page, I have like 3 semicolons. And so when I realized that, I'm like, no, I can't do this anymore. I have to find a different way to work around it. And I did. All of writing is, like all of life is being made aware of who we are, where our tendencies are, so we can begin to play with them. See, as a writer, you get to delight somebody on the page. You get to surprise them on the page. You know, like those colons, we use them when we're making lists, but they're really like a curtain. If you're they're like a curtain. You can pull it back. You can say, you write it and then pull it and then pull the curtain back when something unveils something. You begin to play with it in these ways. If I say stop with a period, it's very different than if I say stop with an exclamation point, right? No is as strong of a sentence as this long one that I will read for you out of thin air, just to show you that breath dictates voice and voice dictates emotion. You see? Same thing. You begin to play on the page. And when you're playing, how many of you have been stuck in play? Not many of you, because you are going at it from the spirit of playing. That's what it takes to overcome the writer's blocks that are there. The ability to see ways of navigating, but also the spirit of play. It's okay. It's only that moment in time. It's only that day. There are 365 days in a year. If you can't do it today, you have another chance tomorrow. The sun is going to come up again, whether you are there to see it or not. But chances are you will be there. You get another chance, another go. Because not all of your relationships are going to be great. Not all of the conversations you have are going to be great. Not all of the speakers who come to you are going to be great. But the thing is, there's a chance, a high likelihood, that tomorrow the sun will shine again. You have an ability. If the speaker isn't great, it's your own responsibility. You can ask them a great question the next day. If they're boring, you can ask an interesting question. If you didn't find the words today, you will find it the next day. You have to believe, otherwise, what is the point of going on? Life is hard. My writer's blocks are easy. They're tiny in the space of life. And it is that perspective that allows me to keep going. Is that helpful? I want to thank you for being so good. I hope that some of what I've said has been useful. And as you continue on your day, I hope that some of the words will guide you when you need them most. Thank you for having me.
you.